Let's get to R.J. Hauman. R.J. is the Government Relations Director for FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. R.J., great to have you, man.
Thanks for having me on, John.
All right, R.J., let's get right to the sauce. Kirstjen Nielsen, nice lady. I've been in several meetings with her. She's really nice. Obviously, the president didn't think she was getting the results. He made a change. What say you?
Right. Well, you nailed it just a second ago. I mean, Trump's relied on immigration neophytes, establishment Republicans, and Obama administration holdovers since he was sworn in on the immigration issue, and he hasn't gotten any results. You know, if he's going to run for re-election on the same issue that he ran on, which is immigration, it's which propelled him into office, now's the time to get stuff done. We're seeing border numbers like we haven't seen in decades. We could have over 100,000 in the month of March, over 100,000 apprehensions, maybe 150,000 in the month of April. And these are all people that we release into the interior of the country. We're not arresting them and deporting them. But, you know, now's the time for him to correct one of the original sins, which first was he named John Kelly the head of DHS despite not having any immigration experience, and then replaced him with Nielsen, who also had no immigration experience. Now he's tapped the CBP guy, Kevin McAleenan, who is an Obama administration holdover, but he does have immigration experience. However, I don't think he's the answer. We at FAIR don't think he's the answer. Now is the time for the president to seek new permanent leadership from outside the agency that is truly committed to his views. We need a whole culture change over at DHS. I know that their hands are tied over there because of congressional inaction and all these activist judges that stop everything they do, but we still need new competent leadership over there. You need to drain the swamp at DHS headquarters. There's a lot of negative forces out there that undermine the president's agenda at every step. So we're hopeful somebody could come in from the outside, maybe somebody like a Chris Kobach, who truly believes in the president's immigration agenda, and maybe, just maybe, they can right the ship during this crucial, crucial time.
So do you have a candidate in mind?
Yeah, no, Chris Kobach would be great.
Chris Kobach,
he's an immigration guy through and through, worked at DHS and DOJ under the Bush administration, and he's somebody that's been close with us, and he's great on the issue. Tom Hauman would be great as well, the former ICE director who then retired. He'd be great in this role. A lot of people have floated Virginia's own Ken Cuccinelli, who does have a little bit of a questionable background on immigration, but as of late has took a hard right turn, and I know he'd be very helpful with a lot of the regulations that come out of DHS. You know, one thing the DHS secretary could do right now that for some reason Nielsen was slow walking was a regulation it proposed in December to supersede the Flores settlement agreement. And that's the court settlement that limits the detention of families with children to just 20 days. And that's a time period that's way too brief to complete a full and fair asylum adjudication. And that loophole right there in current law is the jet engine driving this current crisis and mass catch and release. That regulation needs to be published immediately. So I don't know if that's something that Kirstjen Nielsen and her cronies over there at DHS HQ were holding up, but we're hopeful that new fresh blood coming in there at the top will accelerate things, because there are tools at the president's disposal. A proper deterrence must be restored, and we're hopeful that this change will spur that.
I hope it does spur it, and I love Chris Kobach. I think it'd be a great choice for DHS Secretary because he really gets it. He's been at the forefront of this for some time. Tom Hauman, same thing. He used to be in charge of the Border Patrol down there. He gets it. But I think you're right. We need bold new leadership and people that actually are committed to having a southern border and not just opening them up or playing footsie with the congressional Republican Goldman Sachs open border donor-based crowd, which is exactly what is happening, RJ. I mean, you know, I was reading tweets earlier on my show from you've got to be kidding me, right? From Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin saying, oh, you know, Congress is troubled by the changes going on at DHS. Troubled by the changes? What about the crisis at the border? Like, why don't you go down there, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, and come up with a solution to fix it rather than complain on Twitter about chaos in the DHS? Am I right?
No, I agree. I agree 100%. Listen, Congress could fix this crisis tomorrow. We know we could draft. I could draft a bill right now in the next 30 minutes that would address the crisis at the border right now. You amend the TVPRA, you override the Flores settlement, you increase detention space, and you tighten up our asylum standards. That could be voted on in the Republican Senate tomorrow if Mitch McConnell wanted to do it. The president, what he should be doing is calling on the Senate and say, hey, I'm not doing any nomination. I'm not doing anything. I'm not getting behind any piece of legislation until you put standalone legislation on the floor that closes the asylum loopholes that are driving this crisis. And, hey, it's good politically, too. Pretty much every Democrat in the world seems to be running for president right now, and half of them are in the U.S. Senate. Make them vote on that. Make them tell the American people that they are in favor of prolonging this crisis we're seeing at the border. But for some reason, Mitch McConnell won't do it. Now, we know Nancy Pelosi controls the lower chamber, and she'll never put any legislation on the floor that even pretends to address this crisis. But, we do still control the Senate. Republicans still control the Senate. Do something about it. Stop saying you're troubled about personnel changes. Stop voting for condemning the president for trying to do an emergency declaration. Get something done. You have an opportunity to do so. And we're hopeful that the White House will be a little bit more forceful in this area. Get McConnell on board. We need legislation on the floor to address this. The problem's only going to get worse, and maybe Democrats have a vested interest in prolonging the problem so they can go on the trail in 2020 and say, listen, President Trump ran on this issue, and the problem is worse than it's ever been.
You're so right, RJ. I mean, everything you said is so right, and it's very frustrating to see these do-nothing Republicans sit back and just watch this invasion go by and then whine about what changes the president's making as DHS when they haven't come up with a single solution to do anything at all. All right, let's stay with immigration a second. There was a court ruling yesterday, again, a judge in San Francisco blocking the president's initiative to hold asylum seekers in Mexico, which lawfully they should do because that's the country they came into first, and saying that that's unconstitutional and no, you have to let them come into the U.S. And, of course, as soon as they come into the U.S., then there's 4 other laws protecting them. You can't get them out. So how does that make sense?
Oh, it doesn't make sense. This is just another example of every time the president tries to act on the immigration front, the ACLU or other or other leftist immigrant rights groups, they go forum shop, they find an activist judge under the Ninth Circuit, and then they enjoin the ruling and they stop the president, even though there is no legal basis. And if you actually look at this ruling from this judge, I think it is actually the same judge too that ruled that President Trump can't put a citizenship question on the 2020 census. This is the same guy. These are all the same figures. They know exactly where to go to get the desired ruling. They go to an Obama appointee in the Ninth Circuit. But he wasn't even saying that this Remain in Mexico process wasn't legal or didn't have a sound legal basis. He was just saying the way the president went about it was the wrong way. He didn't properly adhere to the APA, the Administrative Procedures Acts, and issued a regulation and all that. But he's saying, hey, what he was doing is legal, but the way he did it is not. It's the same thing they've done with DACA. Even some judges kind of acknowledge that DACA is unlawful, but the way the administration ended it, it's stuff we've never seen before. The judicial activism right now, especially in the immigration space, it's ridiculous, it's insane, and it's preventing us from being able to secure our border. These judges are giving people that have no rights, no right to come here, more rights than American citizens. It's insane. And again, as long as Congress refuses to act, as long as these judges keep stepping in and restraining the administration every time they try to gain control of our borders, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and then I don't even know what's going to happen.
RJ, is the barrier or the wall that the president is saying is being constructed with this $5 billion, is that real?
No, it's not actually. I mean, these are previously deployed technologies. These are fences that have been around for a while. I don't think it got much attention, but remember when the president enacted those border wall prototypes down there at the border? Those were taken down several months ago. I mean, they were destroyed, and then all they're doing is redeploying, I think, bollard fencing in some areas and replacing existing fencing. And remember, listen, walls are very useful for border security. I think any person down there at the border would tell you that. In some areas, walls are very effective. They're what we need. However, if you look at this crisis that's going on right now, walls are not the answer. These people, they don't climb over the wall and run away from Border Patrol agents. They go to places, and in some areas where the wall is inside, several hundred yards of our border because of environmental, just because of the terrain. So they're already on U.S. soil, and then they just surrender themselves to Border Patrol agents. These people want to get caught. So it's not like we need to keep them out. All they do is they want to get caught by a Border Patrol agent. They say, I claim asylum. They pass their initial credible fear screening, and then we release them into the interior of the country to appear in immigration court 3 years down the line because we don't have detention space to hold them. They know that this is going on. The smugglers are telling people, hey, you bring a child, it ensures you come as a family unit. It ensures your release into the interior of the country. They know how to game the system. A wall can't stop any of that. We need a wall within our humanitarian immigration system to keep out these economic migrants and allow us to help the people who actually need help. We do have the most generous humanitarian immigration laws in the world. There are some people from, maybe a Christian in the Middle East that needs to come here that is actually fleeing real violence, not coming up from Central America so they can go work at a kitchen in Atlanta.
Unbelievable. I got to say that you've got information at the border that we don't have because there is misinformation going out that some kind of a wall is being built. And basically what you're saying now, it isn't. They're simply taking barriers that we had and refurbishing them that they would have done anyway. So I guess what everybody is looking for, RJ Hauman, Government Relations Director from FAIR, Federation for American Immigration Reform, what everybody is looking for is there an area where new wall is being put up? And so far, your answer to that is unequivocally no.
Well, there's new fencing being put up in some areas, but again, it's not new wall. Listen, President Trump, people on the campaign trail weren't yelling, "Build that bollard fencing." People weren't yelling that. They wanted the president to come in, examine new types of actual wall that he could deploy in certain areas that are an upgrade over what we currently have there right now. And that really is not happening. But again, I don't think, going forward, I don't know if it's a bad thing if the president is not out there, begging Congress for wall funding. Again, it's more important right now to amend the TVPRA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act. It's a Feinstein law that prevents us from deporting Central Americans. Again, we can deport a Mexican UAC that crosses the border in 30 seconds, but if you're from Central America, we release you into the interior of the country. Also amend the Flores settlement again so families can be held together in detention, so they're not just released after 20 days, providing a magnet for people to come with children on a treacherous journey up through Central America and through Mexico to our border so they can get released. And we need to tighten the credible fear standard so people can't just come and do their initial interview and say, hey, I'm fleeing violence. Listen, there's some American cities that are more violent than these Central American countries. Baltimore, St. Louis have higher homicide rates than any country in Central America right now. Again, that's not a reason to come here under our humanitarian immigration programs, and especially when you're coming through Mexico. I think everybody can agree that Mexico is a markedly better place than some of these Central American countries. Why aren't they staying there? Once you go through Mexico and you come to our borders, you're just country shopping. You're an economic migrant.
Unbelievable. John Fredericks Radio Network, we're out of time for this segment. I really want to thank RJ Hauman for being with us. RJ, the Government Relations Director of FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. RJ, thanks for being with us, man.
Thank you, John.
Really appreciate it. Good job